Hey, welcome back from fall break. We're so excited you're here with us at the Saltworks podcast. I have your favorite co-host back on the show today, Lindsay Stagg. We are wrestling with the topic of wrestling with the Lord, what true surrender looks like, sometimes how we wrestle over his provision, even when he is providing. And so we're going to dive deep into those topics today, and we're excited to share it with you. But first, I want to tell you about a couple of partners that you need to know. If you've heard people talking about how they are getting discounts on gasoline, let me tell you how they're doing it. Chevron's loyalty program is super easy to set up, and new users will receive 25 cents off per gallon. Yes, per gallon, up to 25 gallons for the first 5 uses when you download the app. Plus, each time you use the app, you are earning 5 points per gallon that can be redeemed for future discounts ranging from 5 cents to 50 cents in future users. You can even get additional in-store purchases for earning additional points. Right now, local users are saving 13 cents per gallon. Best part is the app is completely free to you and very user-friendly. So what are you waiting for? Go to the App Store on your phone, type in Chevron Rewards, and download the Chevron app to start saving today. Now, when we have health crisis and when we have questions to answer with healthcare, it can feel like constant decisions and like a lot of stress. One easy decision is to choose Northeast Imaging for any MRI, CT, X-ray, and ultrasound need that you might have. Northeast Imaging is a patient-friendly diagnostic testing facility that is doctor-trusted and patient-preferred. They are located at 1703 Lammy Lane here in Monroe. Their friendly staff provides high-quality scans focusing on the delivery of exemplary care to the patient and their referring providers. Whether you're using your health insurance or paying cash, Northeast Imaging is almost always more affordable than local hospitals. They are open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So take that decision off your list and tell your healthcare provider you want to go to Northeast Imaging. And now to my conversation with Lindsay. Lindsay, how are you feeling today?
I'm tired. We were just having that conversation. Like, we feel tired today.
I am.
It's
And
a
I'm
Friday.
like, Lord, I care about this conversation
Yeah.
and help me do well. Because I feel like sometimes my nerves or anxiousness about getting the conversation right or
Yeah.
whatever that looks like helps me,
Mm-hmm.
be super aware of like what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
today I'm like, I have umpteen tasks on my list that have to be done before 3.
Yeah.
And I don't want this to be one of those,
Right.
but I'm like,
I
Lord, I
know.
need you to move through my brain fog.
Yeah. I know.
That's where
And
I'm
I
at.
feel like I should feel more anxious about
Yeah,
the things we're talking about today because
I
they're
think the fight has
real.
left our bodies.
Maybe so. We've wrestled so much. We have no more fight left in us. And the Lord's like, that's where I want you. That's where I want you today.
100%.
Because yeah, I'm like, these hit home for sure. And I'm like,
Yeah.
why don't I feel a little bit more antsy about it? But here we are.
Yeah. We're
Yeah.
having the conversation from a place of surrender.
Yeah. I mean, truly though,
We wave the white flag
waving the white
first and
flag.
foremost.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
I want to ask you, starting off, let's kind of dive into surrender. All these topics are going to weave together, so
Yeah.
no rhyme or
Yeah.
reason
Yeah.
necessarily, but um, we're just going to follow our faulty thinking, but
Uh-huh.
also the spirit.
Yeah, for sure.
um, but why is surrender active?
Because I think for true surrender to actually take place, it's an act of dying to self. It's an act of surrendering and like putting to death your will and submitting to God. And that's not passive at all. Like that's hard. And if
Yeah,
you've ever been in a place of real surrender, like true surrender, I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot of wrestling. Like, it's a
yeah.
lot of like, why are you asking me to give this thing up? Like, what
Mm-hmm.
is this? Like, what, I mean, and you can fill in the blank with all sorts of things that, like,
Yeah,
are obedient, like the Lord would ask us to be obedient in and surrendering ultimately to his will. But I think to really actually lay something down is to die to self. It's to die to like what I think is right or what I think is best and what I think is,
Yeah.
it's letting go of your control. And like we say that sometimes, I think, and have ourselves maybe almost deceived into thinking that we have let go of control, but we still
Mm.
I think I think a lot of times we still, like, even in saying that, there's still a piece of us that's like, no, I'm not, like, there's not true surrender. Like, I can think about just myself. Cause I mean, that's a struggle I know that we all have, but of wanting to be in control or wanting to feel like we have control of our circumstances.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's when we find ourselves in a situation where our circumstances are completely out of our control, that like it's so abundantly clear that
Yeah.
that's just an illusion, that control really is just an illusion, that like we're not the ones in control of our lives. Not to say that we don't have, like, the Lord
Right.
gives us like that, the
Yeah.
control over certain aspects of life,
Yeah.
like we are. um
In some ways, that is the wrestle. It's like that's the only control you have is
yeah,
what you're going to do and
right,
your reaction to
yeah,
what's happening in your
yeah,
circumstances.
for sure. And I just think
And I think that's why surrender can be hard, is it's
yeah,
like, I want to control at least my reaction here.
yeah, yeah.
You know,
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I wrote down the definition of passivity because I had to.
Yeah.
Because to me, it doesn't have to be the only reason, but I think it is a very prominent reason of why we don't get to the point of fully surrendering.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about just salvation, although yes, of course, that's the biggest, you know, first and total surrender.
Yes.
But then we have to surrender over and over. You might wrestle every in the morning with the Lord in a
Mhm.
season. There might be one really big moment. I mean, it can look a lot of different ways, but
Mhm.
by definition, passivity is acceptance of what happens without active response or resistance. Um, Chemically speaking, it is a state of inactivity or unreaction or unreactive, either way you want to say that. Um, and I think that when you read that definition, because of everything we know scripturally,
Mhm.
because we believe he is good, because we believe he has good plans, because we believe he's trustworthy, he doesn't cast a shifting shadow, it's not changing, like because we believe all those things, that definition sounds really good
Mhm.
on the surface to accept what happens without active response or resistance. Like that sounds like a very trusting and faithful person.
Mhm.
I think the key part is it's not always honest.
Mm-mm.
There are times where you're like, okay, I've battled this over and over.
Yeah.
Today I have a supernatural peace. I'm just trusting that
Mhm.
that happens. But I think more often than not, we do feel a way about
Mhm.
what's happening in our circumstances, and we don't want to admit that.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think we struggle so much to admit that we feel certain ways and that we want, and even if we want to isolate this just to like believers and in the Christian world,
Mhm.
um like, why do you think it's so hard for us to be willing to admit that we feel those kinds of ways when we know we do, but on the surface we feel like we need to?
I think sometimes we can desire to be right so much, we'd rather be right in our actions than get right with God.
Mhm.
I think sometimes we feel shame about having strong emotions across the board
Oh yeah.
and exponentially so when it comes to God, especially because we have scripture, especially because
Mhm.
we've seen him work it out. And so I think we view it as a lack of faith.
Mm.
Um
That's kind of what I was thinking, that I think
yeah,
a lot of times, like, in the Christian world, we can
and
think,
a
well,
lack
if
of
we feel
maturity.
this way,
Right.
then we don't have enough faith.
Yeah.
And I don't agree with that.
I don't think so either. I think we see scripturally people wrestle.
Yeah.
I think there can be shame tied up into it.
Mhm.
In what we're saying, and I think also, I think it's possible too that there can be some people pleasing, of like this outwardly looks like the right action.
Mhm.
So I'm just gonna make myself
Yeah.
feel this way,
Yeah.
but you can't make yourself feel a certain way.
Mm-mm.
Um, yeah, what comes to mind when you think of scriptural instances where people wrestled?
Oh gosh. I mean, the always the literal Jacob, like
Yeah.
that was a literal
Yes.
wrestling with the Lord. And I think one of the things that we both kind of touched on with that is that at the end of the day, okay, Jacob's circumstance wasn't going to change. He was being obedient to the Lord. He was stressed out and feeling anxious about having to go back and see his brother who, like, the last time wanted
Yeah.
to kill him, like anyways. And so, like, but he was following the Lord back to his homeland, but feeling very anxious about that, of course, and like
Yeah.
he had wronged his brother in all those
Mhm.
ways. And
Still
um,
kinda trying to take it in his own
yeah,
hands
oh
because
yeah.
he's like, "I'm gonna send the
Uh-huh.
women and children ahead."
Yes. Let me
Kinda soften him up.
yeah, send some gifts, like,
Yeah, for sure.
let me butter him up before I come.
Yeah.
Um, and then he wrestles. I mean, and it says, like, doesn't it say, like, he wrestles? I don't have it open to that, but doesn't it
Until,
say,
like,
like,
the
it's like an angel, or it wrestles? It doesn't really say, or wrestles with a man, or what does it
Yeah,
say
but
it? I don't
I
know.
think it is
It
like the belief that it is the
The
Lord.
Lord,
Yeah.
yes. And so anyways, but
Maybe it says somewhere in the New Testament, I'm not sure.
maybe so. But basically he stays up all night and he wrestles all night. And ultimately, I think the outcome of that is that Jacob walked away from that changed.
Yeah.
He still had to go. Like, he was still, his circumstances weren't changing,
Right.
but the way he felt about it. And also, like, I think what's such a cool picture in that is that when you keep reading, and when he does, I think it's in Genesis 33, maybe,
Mhm.
whenever, like, he does first encounter Esau, like, Esau's heart's completely changed. And,
Mhm.
like, what a blessing that is, and what a kindness that's like, okay, well, the Lord's also working things out all
Right.
across the board. Like, and Jacob didn't know that. Like, Jacob didn't see that. He didn't know that
Mhm.
going into it, but he wrestled with the Lord, and nothing about what was happening changed, but Jacob's heart was changed. And then in some other regard, like, Esau's heart was changed. And,
Yeah.
that was not known to Jacob either. So I don't know.
Mhm. I think that too, that's what we need in surrender, like, when he physically walked away with a limp,
Mhm.
because every time we walk away with acknowledgement of our limp, we must grow more and more dependent on God, and that
Yeah.
is the purpose
Yeah.
of sanctification.
Yeah.
And sometimes that comes through wrestling.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, and I mean, if we at one of the other ones
yeah.
that I mean, I say we talk about this a lot, we probably do, but I think at other times, like, we also seem to, like, forget that, like, Jesus brought his real feelings to the Lord and ultimately showed us what it looks like
Mhm.
to wrestle in his own way and to feel a certain way and to take those emotions to
Yeah.
the Father and ultimately say, not my will, but yours.
That's how we know it's not legitimate, whenever we're like,
Right.
"Okay, God,
Yeah.
you've got
Yes.
this." I'm not saying never, I'm not.
Right.
Yes, there are moments, but Jesus said, "Now is my soul troubled," before he
Yes.
said,
Yes.
"But glorify your name,"
Yes.
or ask for the cup to be passed, before he said, "Not my will, but yours be done."
Yes.
You know? And
Yeah.
so that is the authentic way
Mhm.
to walk with God, if that's the way Jesus did it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you pointed out the Psalms.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Um, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, he starts over here,
Yeah.
you know, way out here. "Where are you?"
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Over and
like
over again, over and
yes.
over again, and
Yeah.
it's like, I think I said, like, for me, like, what I've learned in wrestling with the Lord, that it's like you lay it all out there first. I mean,
Mhm.
that's what we do. Like, it is, "Okay, here's how I'm really feeling about this, Lord."
Yeah.
And, not, and I've struggled, and I don't honestly, until my last, like, difficult season, I don't know that I really ever did this because I probably fell into the camp of, well, that feels wrong. Like it feels like I'm not having enough faith if I feel this way about something, to be honest with the Lord. And I'm not saying I never did. I mean, especially
Mhm.
like we've talked about my infertility season, like I'm sure that there were points, but like I don't know that I would look back at that season and acknowledge that it was marked by really wrestling with the Lord. I mean,
Mhm.
maybe it was to a degree of
Yeah.
questioning like, okay, well, why, but I think a lot of times I kind of just glossed over how I really felt about it and just used that okay, but like it's in,
Mhm.
false surrender, maybe, like maybe not full surrender
Yeah.
of okay, it's in your hands. And it's like we know those things. Like, yes, I know that. Like my head tells me, yeah, I know, Lord, I know what the word says. And I know that you are sovereign and I know that you are in control and you hold all things.
Mhm.
Um, but I think there's a piece missing of I'm trying to think what I'm trying to say here. Like there's a disconnect between what we know and what we really feel in
Yeah.
our heart.
Yeah.
And so it's like I think a lot of times like that's where we get stuck is like we can know all these things, but we don't ever let that seep down into like actually informing
Yeah.
our true beliefs and what do we believe in our heart. And so like, laying it all out there, being honest with the Lord, because I mean, we've said this before multiple times, like he knows how we feel
Yeah.
and he's big enough to handle
Even if
that.
you don't know how you
Even if,
feel.
yeah, I mean, yeah, like he's big enough to handle that
Right.
and also to put you in your place because that's,
Mhm.
that's necessary too sometimes. But
Yes.
then to remember, in this wrestling, it's getting out how we really feel, but also it's remembering the works of the Lord. Like when you find yourself in a circumstance or a situation where you're like, I don't understand why you're asking me to do this. I don't understand why I am where I am right now. Like I do
Yeah.
not like this at all. Um, I feel all sorts of ways about it and I can't see you. I can't see what's good. I can't see, any of those things. But what we can do is look back and remember and remind ourselves, okay, but God, here I was also in a situation where I didn't see you. It didn't feel good. It wasn't what I wanted it to be. It didn't look like I thought it was going to look like. But how are you good then? Because I mean it is. When you're in the
Mhm.
middle, like it's nearly impossible to actually see. And it's not until we're removed from a situation where we're like, okay, Lord.
Yeah.
And then there are a lot of times that is kind in allowing us to see his goodness and his faithfulness in the midst. But
Mhm.
it's harder. It's harder when you're in the middle of it.
It is.
But to be able to look back and think about the goodness of God in other seasons and rest and hope and see like, okay, God, but you did, even if even if circumstances didn't look,
Yeah.
because I mean, at the end of the day, like something might have looked completely different and might not have made any sense, but when you're removed from it, you can still look back and see the faithfulness of God and trace his hand and then
Yeah.
praise. I mean, that's to me, that is the point of true surrender. It's like, I
Mhm.
don't like this. I am not okay with this. I do not
Yeah.
understand this, but you are still worthy to be praised because
Yeah.
you are still good. And you are still in control. And I do trust. And I think that's, I kind of had this thought of like, what do we really like and I asked this question of myself, like, what's at the heart of our
Mhm.
unwillingness to really surrender? And I think for me, it's a lack of trust. It's a
Mhm.
lack of trust that God is who he says he is and that he is good. When you're in the middle of a circumstance that doesn't feel good and like you look around and you think there's nothing good here. I think when we find ourselves in those places of wanting to say that we're surrendering, but not really, it's that we don't trust. Like we
Mhm.
don't trust that God is who he says he is.
Yeah.
And we don't trust that something's better in his hands than it is in ours. And it's that, I think it comes back to that piece of just feeling like, can I let go of this? And when you're in a situation where your trust in all things has been compromised and like is now questionable, because like I know, I mean, I will be fully transparent, like I maybe for the first time ever in my life have asked the Lord, like, are you good? Like,
Mhm.
can I actually trust you? Like, can I really trust you in this? Here we go. with our emotions. But and I think when you're there and you feel that fear of like, can I trust you? Like, are
Mhm.
you really good? It's really hard to let go
Yeah.
and to really surrender in those moments of like, I am going to give this to you, but I'm also struggling to trust that you're going to do what's best.
Yeah.
Like, because we think we know what's best.
Mhm.
Um, what do you think is a mark like for you? And what do you think is a mark of true surrender? Like, how do we know?
Okay, well, I think I have 2 answers to this, and we'll see at the end of the first if I can remember the second one, 'cause I really am fighting brain fog. But one, I hate to even say this, but when I think about it from God's perspective, I just had this conversation with, one of our neighbors here at the office. The other day, she dropped by to say hey, and we got on the topic of the garden and
Hmm.
how, why would he have put the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the garden where they could access it
Yeah.
if it was going to lead to this, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Um, fast forward to present,
Yeah.
we have sin in the world because it was present. So why would a good God put that there? And the answer is because he wants us to have a choice
Yeah.
of whether or not we're going to choose him. And I think when you look at passivity, it's robotic.
Hmm.
There's some robotic going through the motions. It's not an active choice of God. I know that it looks like it is,
Hmm.
but it's actually functioning of a place of I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
But when you wrestle and when you go through, I don't want to do this. I feel all kinds of ways. I feel like you're not going to meet me here. This is my worry and this is my fear. And though he slay me,
Yeah.
yet I will trust him.
Right.
There's a beautiful mark of surrender right there because you've acknowledged all the reasons you can see.
Hmm.
Those are all the things you can see of why it would look like not a good place to put your trust.
Hmm.
But then the faith starts there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the things unseen, it's belief in the things of unseen of like, but I will put my trust here.
Hmm.
As far as marks, like if we're looking at ourselves, um, I think that when we're actively wrestling and fighting the Lord and journaling and going into prayer and having some large emotions
Hmm.
with our friends and being honest about those things and working through those things, it will get to the fight leaving your body. It
Yeah.
will get to the surrender of this is what I've chosen to do against everything I've felt and
Yeah.
everything I can see. I think passivity a lot of times, and we can all relate to this. I'm
Oh,
about to
yeah.
step on some toes. Our toes are getting stepped on too.
Yeah.
I think passivity oftentimes results in passive aggressiveness.
Hmm.
And I think the reason for that is, and there can be a lot of different reasons, not an expert on this, just walked it a couple times, um, is because when you shove down your emotions and you don't think they're allowed and you don't think a fight um, is permissible to you, you expect that.
Hmm.
Your body knows you felt a way
Yeah.
about the things you've experienced, but you expect everybody else to operate that same way. So you don't understand when someone else is
Right.
fighting. You don't understand when someone else is being emotional, and you can almost kind of feel like I think thoughts can pop up of like, well, you didn't see my pain when I was
Hmm.
whatever,
Yeah.
but you didn't say your pain.
Right.
You weren't even honest with yourself.
Right.
You weren't even honest with your God. But you expect everyone else to have seen that, so you don't have time for theirs.
Yeah.
And I do think that that can be a mark of like, I might need to go back to the cross and relinquish some things
Yeah.
from where this is coming from.
Well, and I would say too, like, kind of, I think maybe some, and you can correct me if this wasn't like part of your train of thought there,
Yeah.
but like, I think for me, more recently recognizing like, okay, for however long I feel like whether you are wrestling, because most of the time when we're wrestling, like there is a probably a disconnect, like a what's the word I'm looking for? A restlessness,
Yeah.
to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think when we're not engaging, there can be a restlessness that you
Yes.
can't pinpoint, like you don't acknowledge. Like when you are engaged with the Lord, there's probably a restlessness in like, I know what I know, but I don't want, like
Well,
I'm battling.
let me give you a surface example. It's the difference between me being able to come to your house and be like, "Hey, I'm glad to be here, but I'm gonna be a bump on a log tonight.
Yeah.
It is not you. I am fighting
Yes.
this cold.
Yeah.
I am whatever, but I really do want to be here,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I know I'm gonna seem zoned
Yeah.
tonight." And you go, "Okay, I'm
Mhm.
cool." And then me just being like, "I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what's wrong with me."
Yeah.
I haven't done the work of asking myself and
Yes.
being curious about what and communicating with you it's not you.
Yeah.
And so there's all kinds of implications of that, but when we can be honest about where we are, it puts everyone else at ease. It
It
doesn't mean you have to come and put on a face and be your best, but just be
Yeah.
honest about where you
Just
are
being
so we can all
honest,
go,
yeah.
"Oh, that's okay. Yeah, me too."
There's a peace. There's a peace that
Yes.
comes for all involved, and that's, like, the
Right.
word that comes to my mind over and over again. Whenever there is true surrender, you do experience the peace that surpasses understanding, and it's not
Yeah.
to say that it's in all things, like, you have to constantly I think there's just a when you recognize that a restlessness or whatever is coming from lack of engagement with the
Mhm.
Lord, you're being passive about something, it still spills out,
Mhm.
but you can't pinpoint, like, you just don't know, like, you don't
Yeah.
like, or like, I mean, I'm speaking from my own experience, like, when I choose it's like you may know, but you're, like, choosing to ignore
Mhm.
whatever that is, that there's, like, just a frustration and then whatever, and it does spill out, and then you're like, "Wait a minute, okay." But I think it's that point in which you're honest with yourself of saying, "Okay, I don't know where this is coming from, or I do know and I'm just choosing not to acknowledge it. So
Mhm.
let me do what I need to do with the Lord."
Yeah,
Because that's where it has to start.
it
It's not,
does.
it's not fair to
Mhm.
start that process with the people like that.
Mhm.
You go to the Lord first with that. And
Absolutely.
not to say that people aren't a part of that along the way if it's needed, friends, whatever, but I think you have to start with the Lord
Yeah.
because number one, he's going to reveal to you what it is,
Mhm.
if you're willing to listen. And I don't know, just I think the
Yeah.
peace is the mark. Like for me, at least in my own life, peace has been the marker of yes, I might be wrestling, so there may be a restlessness in that sense, but like overall, when I realize like this is what like
Mhm.
the Lord's asking me to let go of something that I wasn't meant to hold in the first place.
Right.
9 times out of 10, it's
Yeah.
like you are trying to control, you're trying to hold these things that were never meant to be yours to hold, like it,
Right. Yeah,
and I just think there's a piece that is a marker there because like you said, even
it
being able to
is.
communicate to somebody else, like it isn't like I'm not here feeling this way and I don't, because then that puts everyone kind of on edge of like feeling like they need to
Mhm.
walk on eggshells or like, "Well, I don't really know what's going on. Is it me?" There's a whole lot of this
When you
back and
don't
forth.
pinpoint your restlessness, it leaves everybody else to try to figure out
Yeah. And fill in the gaps
what it
with from their
is.
own,
Yeah.
which is never good.
Oh, yeah, it just leads to insecurity.
Yeah.
Um, I think another mark too is compassion.
Mhm.
You know, we've all experienced situations where there was a lack of compassion or empathy,
Mhm.
with an acquaintance or a friend or whatever that
Yeah.
looks like. Fill in the blank, everybody's situations and experiences are different, but where this person has had hardships, but they've refused to let those hardships change them.
Yeah.
And look at Jacob. He
Mhm.
walked away with a limp. Like our experiences should change us.
Yeah.
They should break us. They should mold us to be softer, to
Yeah.
bend towards the Lord.
Yes.
Um and those things should change us, and it's actually good to be broken.
Mhm.
And I think we don't think that in the church,
Mm.
um which is a really strong weapon in the enemy's hands because no one outside of the church can relate to not being broken.
Right.
It, it's
Right.
something that we all feel, but we hold a lot of pride.
Mm.
But there, when you have wrestled and you've been broken, whether you want it to be or not,
Right.
um, you need other people that have felt that. And that's not to say that they've had to walk through the same experiences you've had,
Right.
but they've allowed their experiences to shape their lives
Yeah.
and bend their wills towards God. Whereas we've also had experiences where people we can name the hardships they've walked through, but they've refused to let it touch them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of this swimming along the surface, and you can't relate.
Yeah.
You can't relate. And so I think that compassion is
Mm-hmm.
another marker.
Yeah.
It's not just um to meet circumstances that brought suffering, but to really know suffering,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that I think can knit us together.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm-hmm. I have this thought.
yeah.
Let me see if I can formulate my question in the right way. And we may have already touched on this. I'm not real sure, but what do you? And I mean, I kind of have this thought in my own head as to where this question's coming from. But like, what do you think? When someone goes, and this may be, we may have already touched on this to some degree. Whenever, like, what do you think keeps people from allowing their experiences in life to change, like like those hardships? Like, why do you think we don't allow that change to happen? Like, what?
Um, I would say one big one is control.
Yeah,
You're out of control when you are broken
yeah,
because you can't put the pieces back together, and we know that innately, even if we can't put words to it in that
mm-hmm,
moment.
mm-hmm,
And so it's like, what if I allow myself to break and you don't fix this?
yeah,
And you don't redeem me and you don't meet me here. Will I just be out here broken? And
mm-hmm,
I think that's a deep thing we're not able to name in the times of our pain, but I do think that that's a deep feeling. For me, it's been pride. Um, I hate that
yeah,
so much, but I have not liked being humbled this season.
yeah,
And I could have told you, yeah, I probably struggle with pride a little bit. I didn't know the depths of that
yeah.
until we've been wrestling over some things. And like I mean this is my journal right here, and like I have many a journal entry that starts with I hate this. Like, and like I mean that is just the honest truth, and I
Yeah,
have to start there. Um
right.
and I hate here's what we hate. It brings forth our ugliness, and we don't
Yeah,
want to see that.
yeah,
We don't want to see that. But here's a beautiful thing. Even as those ugly parts of us bubble to the surface in refinement, remember that His grace covers all.
yeah, yeah.
We are moving through the process of sanctification, but we've already been covered. We've already been deemed enough and
Mm-hmm.
masterpieces.
Yeah,
And so I think that, can maybe help us bring
yeah,
some freedom of like, yes, I do want to walk in refinement. And the question is why, well, why is that needed? If He's covered all of our um all of our sins and all
yeah.
of our future sins, why is that needed? Why is this conversation even happening? Well, Jesus said the most important commandments were to love God and love
Mm-hmm.
people. And if you don't believe that that is the most important thing you could do with your life, then this is a silly conversation.
Yeah.
And we're splitting hairs here. But if you do believe that that's your job, then you have to know how to do that well.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be pliable
Yeah.
in His hands.
Well, and I would say too, on the like, we hate that ugliness to bubble to the surface. We hate acknowledging it. We hate seeing it. But also when we don't, we lack grace.
Yeah.
We lack grace, and like we've been given so much grace.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think when we aren't able to acknowledge one, the grace that we've been given
Hmm.
for the covering of our sins, we are not willing to extend grace to others either. Um, and if we don't think, that may be a whole nother topic, honestly, of
No,
like
I
we
think
don't
it
think
applies.
if
If we can ignore our sin,
yeah,
then like
we don't really need grace. Like, what do we need
yeah,
grace for? And then
yeah,
why would we extend it to others?
yeah.
I had another thought too of the like, why do we not let our pain touch us sometimes? And I think for me in my own life, it's fear. It's the fear of being changed. It's the fear of
Mhm.
change because we know what we know and we feel comfortable. There's
Right.
comfort in, even if like, something brings us out of that comfort, like there's a
Mhm.
fear in acknowledging because we think, okay, well, what we knew was comfortable,
Mhm.
even though that's been completely
Mhm.
flipped upside down, with certain whatever the circumstance might be
Yeah.
that you find yourself in that doesn't feel good or whatever it might look like, but we all we can hold on to is like, but we know what this is like. And
Mhm.
I think for me it's this fear of, if I let go and I surrender to you, is it going to be better?
Yeah.
Is what's coming on the other side of this actually better than
Mhm.
what I knew and what I was comfortable in?
Yeah.
And so like there's a little bit of a fear there of like change and
Mhm.
comfort and like, and so I think we can kind of sometimes want to mask over what's actually hurtful and painful because we don't want anything to change. We don't want anything to feel different.
You know what's interesting? It reminds me of a conversation I had about 6 or 7 years ago. A friend of mine, from high school had kinda walked away from the church, and we keep in contact and, had chosen a lifestyle counterintuitive to the church or counteractive, whatever the word I'm looking for
Yeah.
is. Um, and we having coffee, just catching up on
Hmm.
life in general, but also got on the topic of that. And as she's kind of sharing some things about what she thinks he's like and what
Hmm.
she is desiring in this moment or whatever the direction she's wanting to go, how she doesn't feel like those things align, um her this lifestyle and
Right.
the Bible. I said, would you do something for me before you decide that, before you decide to go this route and to walk away from him? Would you just get to know him?
Hmm.
Would you just get to know him in these pages before you decide, before you reject what you don't know?
Yeah.
And I will never forget her response. She said, I'm just afraid. I promise you, this was the quote. It was very profound to me and convicting. She said, I'm just afraid that if I start reading this, it will change everything. And I was like, I left there thinking she just gave scripture more weight than I give it.
Yeah.
And I'm seeking him. I'm choosing to seek him.
Yeah.
And so there is something innate in us. And she had a very profound way of putting that into words that I'll never forget.
Hmm. Yeah. Because it does.
It it
It
does.
does.
Yeah.
I mean, and the obviously from the moment of like surrendering your life to Christ, but like it's an ongoing
Yeah.
change. And I think a thing that has convicted me in that statement is to think back over the course of my life and also moving forward to recognize, am I feeling like, is a, if I start to feel too comfortable, why?
Mhm.
If there's not some kind of discomfort or change, not to say that like,
He doesn't bring comfort.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but just I think it was Kelly's episode where she said something like at the very beginning that I was
Yeah.
like, man, that like really struck
Uh-huh.
a nerve with me of
I will
like,
not be praying
I don't
that.
want to ask that question of
That's
like,
great for you.
yeah, I'm glad you did that. But just that like I've started asking Lord to like make me uncomfortable. I've gotten too comfortable. I'm like, wow, like the ability to recognize that and
Mhm.
to see it potentially as a um maybe a passive, like maybe you're being passive in your relationship with the Lord in that
Yeah.
regard. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
what that could turn into, but or
Mhm.
where what could be stemming from that. But
Yeah.
because the reality is like when you look at the life of Jesus and his disciples, like earthly comfort was not really a big part of that. Like it
Yeah.
just wasn't. I don't
Well,
know.
how many questions do we see the disciples
Oh,
ask
yeah.
Jesus?
Yeah.
They go to him and ask him all the time, "Why
Yeah.
did you do this? Why
Yeah.
whatever?" And there's a lot of people that ask him questions that are trying to
Yeah.
pin him to a
Yeah.
to a
Yeah.
a situation to, frame him for wrongdoing, but they are actively following and they're still saying like, "Is this the time where you're gonna
Hmm.
reinstate the kingdom of Israel? Like, are you gonna do this for us now?"
Right.
Like they still struggle to know what it looks like, and we have that same thing in our
Absolutely. Yeah.
hearts,
Oh, yeah. Goodness.
um
Yeah.
and I think for me that gets over into like provision,
Hmm. For sure.
And it, my first thought is that even sometimes I'm afraid to ask for provision because I'm afraid that he won't.
Mhm.
And then I'm like, where am I going to go from there?
Yeah.
What am I going to do with that? Because then I'm just going to be, um, then I'm just going to be angry and
Yeah.
frustrated, and I don't want to feel that way. And so I'm just not going to ask.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I could chase down that that thought, um, and we've talked a lot about that in the episode of prayer, so we won't talk about
Right.
dive into that, but also sometimes when he does provide, um, I don't always like his provision.
No.
And that's been a wrestle,
Mhm.
a humbling thing. It makes me think of two different instances, but one is in Second Kings 5, I believe.
Mhm.
Naaman is the commander of the king's army in Syria. I think I'm saying that right. And Syria is, enemy of Israel. Um, and he's in a prominent position. He's an important man. I think scripture describes him as a mighty man, or,
Mhm.
but he's a leper. He has leprosy.
Yeah.
And, there's nothing he could do to heal himself, no matter what position he was in. No matter how important he was, he couldn't fix that. And so he's searching for a fix. And because they're enemies of Israel, there is a servant from Israel from the last raid. Um, and she says something. I think she maybe knows Elisha or knows of him.
Mhm.
Elisha was God's prophet to Israel at the time. And so she says something about him. And so the king sends him, and he goes, and Elisha sends out a servant to tell him to go wash in the Jordan 7 times. And he is, I think scripture says he leaves in a rage, which I'm like, I feel very seen.
Yeah.
But not who I wanted to feel seen with in
Right.
scripture today, um, but because first of all, think about it. You think you're better than Israel. You're
Mhm.
having to go to Israel for
Yeah.
this healing. And then this prophet of this other god, I'm assuming he's not a follower of
Right.
Yahweh, Naaman, and sends a servant. I mean, how dare you? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And then he tells him to go dip 7 times in the Jordan River, which probably seemed silly. And also, he thought of the Jordan as dirty and beneath
Yeah.
him. He was like, "We've got better rivers. Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
And he leaves, and he's not going to do it because sometimes we hate being humbled so much we'd rather keep our pride than get the healing or the provision.
Mhm. Yeah.
There's a word for somebody. But he's not going to do it, and someone says, maybe one of his servants is like, no, no, did you get a word from that prophet? Like, that's actually an honor. That's a great word, I think, is
Right.
his words. And he's like, did he actually say if you did this you would be healed? Like, in his mind, he's like, not only is that an honor that you got a word, but you
Right.
got a promise
Right.
with an action. That's a big deal.
Right.
And so actually there was honor in this thing that he viewed as great humility, to the point of humiliation, probably.
Mhm.
And that's something that I've wrestled with the Lord. Like, okay, yes, I want to be humbled, and yes, I want humility, but like to the point of humiliation, like,
Mhm.
would you take it that far? Um, but then he walks away cleaned, and there's
Yeah.
all kinds of gospel messages in that
Yeah.
for salvation and through sanctification, that he didn't just walk away cleaned, he walked away humbled.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes when we read that verse, delight in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart, we can think, why aren't you giving me what I want? Why
Yeah.
aren't you
Yeah.
providing in the way that makes the most sense, that I can still hold on to my pride and my
Mhm.
image and what at my plans, whatever that looks like, whatever that provision is, whether it's healing, finances, friendships,
Mhm.
answers, whatever that provision looks like. Um, sometimes I think that he isn't giving us what we want because he is actually giving you the desires of your heart.
Yeah.
If the desire of your heart is to live in his will and glorify him in everything, like the desire of my heart is for it to not be about my glory. Well,
Yeah.
and being humbled
Right.
and me still following, he is actually giving me the desires of my heart.
Yeah. Hmm.
My flesh loathes it.
Well, yeah, of
Um,
course.
but and that's where the wrestling comes in. Did you know I looked this up, the Hebrew word for delight
Hmm.
is anag. I'm not gonna try to pronounce that for you. But it means to bend or to incline to be soft.
Hmm.
And we think of delight as, I love this.
Right,
This is
right.
great.
Yeah, yeah,
And yes, there are going to be times where we
absolutely,
delight in that regard.
absolutely.
But to continue to incline and to continue to bend and become softer, that sounds like vulnerability
Yeah, which we
to the
don't like.
Lord. Yes. But like be open and soft and
Yeah,
incline your heart to him and he will give you the desires of your heart
yeah. Hmm.
despite what you want.
Yeah. Well, and I was reading, so I'm doing this, I just started this little study on the attributes of God.
Yeah.
Um, and what like the very first attribute that I got to is eternal. And I just think about, and I think we've said this before, I think just either on here or in conversation, but a lot of times when we ask for certain things or we want certain kinds of provision, we want it to look a certain way, like we don't see the whole picture, and God is eternal. Like only he can see. And I think maybe you've said this before that like he gives us what we might would have asked for if we could see the whole picture,
Right.
but we can't see the whole picture. And so in the moment, sometimes the way that he provides and it not looking like what we want, it can be frustrating, and it makes us mad because we're like, well, I don't understand. But it's like that's the I don't understand. Like I
Right.
don't understand all things. I don't know all things. And if I am truly desiring to seek the Lord above everything else, and I have to trust that He does. And whatever that provision looks like in the moment is because He knows what we don't.
Mhm.
And so, like, that's just hard. Like, that's hard
It is, and that
when we're finite, like, we're limited. We
yeah,
can't, we don't, and so
yeah,
it's hard.
and we
I
have
mean, it goes back to
1,000
trust.
obstacles in our way
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yes.
It, it takes me back to surrender. To me, true surrender after the fight
Yeah.
looks like, "But you are God and I am not.
Yep.
Where else would I go?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And that kinda hits on what you said. I know that the Lord being your provider has been a large theme in your life,
It
whether
has
you
got it
liked it or
tattooed on my
not.
body.
Yeah.
Got my personal tattoo.
Share that with us for those who aren't familiar with that name and
Yeah.
what that means to you.
Yeah. All right, let's see if I can do this. And not, because I think that is honestly would probably fall into like a portion of my testimony a little bit, and a more fresh and recent portion of that testimony.
Mhm,
But roughly a year ago, maybe back like last summer, I had some time away and at the beach just by myself, and the Lord just kept putting the story of Abraham and Isaac on my heart.
yeah,
And I just remember thinking like, why do you keep bringing me back here, God?
mhm.
Like, what in the world?
Give us a short version for
Yeah.
anyone who isn't familiar.
So the story of Abraham and Isaac, Abraham, was given the promise from
Mhm,
God that he would be the father of all the nations. I mean, the Jesus
mhm.
comes from, all the things.
Yeah,
And basically Abraham, and his wife go through like that she's barren, like she doesn't,
mhm.
so it's like for you to give me this promise doesn't make any sense because
I can't be a father
we
at
we
all.
can't, yeah, we can't father children. Like that's not happening. She was in old age,
Mhm.
whenever, and I mean, there's a whole lot in between there of them
Yeah,
trying to do things on their own, like make the promise happen in their own way.
yeah.
And ultimately she has Isaac. And so it's like, I'm like, wait, did I get that confused? Am I telling the right?
Yeah, uh-huh.
They took it in their own hands, right?
Yeah, they
Or am I
told
confusing them with someone else?
no, they absolutely did
Okay.
because he has Ishmael,
Yes, that's right.
and that was
Okay,
their
I was like,
idea.
for a split second, I was like, "Wait, did I mix
Yeah.
up a different
Mm-mm.
story?" Um, but they have Isaac, and
I'm
then
also thinking, like, Sarah laughed when she got that promise
I
because
know.
she had been passive about the way she felt.
Exactly,
I think
exactly,
it leads
yeah.
to bitterness and
Oh,
resentment when we're
absolutely.
not, like,
Oh, yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Mhm.
proceed.
No, that's a whole
Yeah.
nother that's a whole nother conversation. When we're passive, for sure, does leads to those things.
Yeah.
But okay. But anyways, let me move on.
I'm gonna pass right on past that.
Moving along.
That's neither here nor there. Um,
But so they have Isaac, and then the Lord tells Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, which like
mhm.
is insanity from all angles. Like there's no way you can look at that and be like, "Excuse me, what did you just say?" Um because everything that the Lord tells Abraham to do, it's like I remember this resonating so much with me in my situation because and I read this book that was like perfect timing. I
Mhm.
recommend it highly. It's by Tony Evans. It's Between a Rock and a Hard Place.
Yeah.
Like it's basically where you find yourself in obedience to the Lord, but your obedience feels like it is contradicting what you also know of the Lord. And you're like, what in the world? Like, I
Mhm.
don't understand this. But then, like, it's ultimately
Why
surrendering
would
to
you
the,
ask me to
yeah,
do
why would you
this?
ask me
Doesn't
to?
seem like it's good plans.
Yes. Yeah. And it seems like it's opposite of what
Yeah.
what the Lord is about and all the things we know of the Lord. And so,
Yeah.
like, him telling him to sacrifice his son,
Yeah.
anyone that looks at that is going to be like, what? Excuse me? Did we hear that? Did he hear that correctly?
Yeah.
Um, but like what's so crazy and I remember thinking like gosh I wish that we had the internal dialogue that was going on in Abraham the whole way but he was obedient like
Yeah.
he got up and he did all the things um and like whatever and I mean even Isaac along the way is like hey we don't have a ram or a lamb or whatever it was
Mhm.
and so even that, like, I think I should have looked it up specifically what Abraham's response was, but
The
it was
Lord will
something like the
provide,
Lord will
I
provide.
think.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like I think that's like the first time he says that. And so what's also cool is you fast forward to Hebrews, like when they're talking about that in
Yeah.
Hebrews, and a piece of this that you don't get is that like, oh, hold on, my brain is like,
I think it
what
was
is it that
something that Abraham believed he was gonna
resurrect,
resuscitate.
yes,
Yeah.
and, like, that he had no premise to like, that had never happened
Yeah.
before, so, like, he had so much faith in the Lord that, like, "You made this promise to me, and,
Yeah.
like, you will fulfill it. I don't know how you're going to, but, like, I'm gonna obey,"
Yeah.
even to the point that he's like, "Well, he'll just bring him back to life," and, like, what's crazy is he had no grounds at that point in time in history
Mhm.
to say, like, "I've seen him do this," but, like, he just knew the Lord could. Anyways, and so goes through the whole thing. I mean, has Isaac on the altar,
Mhm.
which I mean, we always like laugh about like that whole like walk back home, and
Yeah.
just everything of like, all right, Dad, what in the world?
Isaac
Like,
had some wrestling to do
for
after
sure,
that.
for sure. But the Lord did provide a ram,
Mhm.
because like and it was, what is it that the Lord said? Okay, so here's what he says. So Abraham tells the boy when tells Isaac when he's questioning, he says the phrase, and then he said, "We're going to go worship, and then we will be right back."
Mm.
Like there was just a confidence in him. And it said,
Yeah.
"God will provide a sheep for the burnt offering, my son."
Mhm.
Okay, so the Lord at that moment, when Abraham has Isaac on the altar, Abraham picks up the knife to sacrifice his son, and at that moment, the angel of the Lord says, "Abraham, Abraham," and he says, "Yes, here I am." He said, "Don't lay a hand on the boy. Don't hurt him in any way, for now I know that you truly fear God, for you have not withheld from me even your son, your only son."
Mm.
And like, I think at first we can look at that and say, well, like, why would the Lord, like, why would that be what is spoken? Because of course the Lord knew,
Mm.
but did Abraham? It kind of goes back to I think something
Yeah.
we said, maybe with the wilderness, but like, did Abraham know?
Yeah.
And like that maybe there is this piece of that equation where it's like Abraham needed to get to the point too of like true surrender to know that like I do fully trust you, Lord. Anyways, but all that to
Yeah.
say. for me, I felt like, the Lord was asking me um, to surrender something, that didn't make any sense. It was like, well, but you like this is a good thing, and this is,
Yeah.
you know,
Seems counterintuitive to what you've said in
yes,
scripture.
yes. And anyways, like through all of that, just and the way things kind of unfolded, it was like this story it made sense kind of in hindsight of like, well, no wonder you were leading me here. Like, no wonder you led me to this
Mhm.
story. But it didn't stop there because I even wrestled with like, okay, well, if I do this, if I obey, because we have this picture that Abraham didn't have. He didn't know what that provision was going to look like in the moment, but he just knew the Lord would provide.
Yeah.
And for him it was a ram. That like in all of that, I went into this whole like, okay, I'm going to obey, and I don't like this, and I don't agree with this, and I don't understand how this makes any sense,
Mhm.
for the big picture of anything. And it feels like it's going against everything that feels right or feels like it would make sense, but I'm going to obey. So what's the ram? Like, what's the ram going to be? Like, I could just remember asking that question over and over again. Like,
Yeah.
how are you going to provide?
Yeah.
Almost so that I don't have to actually do this.
Right.
And that was that was a long wrestle. And I wish I could say like at what point, um, I even like kind of had this aha moment, which it sounds so silly when I say it out loud. Like that was what I'm about to say was an aha moment, like duh. But for me, it was like, there's got to be a way out of this. Like, there's got to be a way that like, I'm not going to actually have to do this, because it seemed like, oh, well, here's Abraham. He was going to do it. And like he went through the motions and he did
Mhm.
all the things. But I think,
Took the wood.
yeah. And it's like, but there was a heart posture too that
Mhm.
I was lacking to some extent of like, I'm
Mhm.
going to do this, and I don't, which a lot of times obedience does start there. It starts with
Mhm.
steps. It's steps of faith, and your feelings don't always match up. But it was I'm gonna do this, but what's my ram gonna be? And like Emily Jones probably doesn't even remember this. And I won't be able to say like exactly what she said to me without going into like the whole story, but which I'm not gonna do today. But basically she was like, Lindsay, your ram's not gonna be what you think it's gonna be. Like, your ram can't be that. Like, that doesn't like. And I
Mhm.
mean, like, I don't even know if she remembers saying that, or why we would. It was literally just in sitting next to each other in church
Yeah.
that she was like, "You've got to know, like, that's your ram's not going to be what you think it's going to be." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Then what is it going to? Like, I mean." And I wrestled with that for a while because I was like, "Okay, God, if I'm going to obey and I'm going to whatever, and I am going to sacrifice and I am going to surrender this thing, which I
Mhm.
hadn't at that point. What is it? Like, what's it going to be?" And like, I remember, journaling one night, and I don't know if it was in the process of journaling that like it was just like, oh, Lindsay, like, you've been missing the whole point of any of this, is that you want provision, you want to not have to surrender this thing, but like at the end of the day, what the Lord is trying to show you is that He is the provision. Like, the ram is Jesus. Like, the ram
Mhm.
was always going to be Jesus. And like, that was so, like, I don't know. I mean, and I think we can look at this and say, like, well, yeah, we know that's foreshadowing, and we know like the Lord provides, but like, for me in that moment, it was like, I am looking for something earthly to be my provision.
Yeah.
And the Lord was like, no, Lindsay,
Yeah.
I am your provision. Like,
Mhm.
I am what you need in this moment. It's not rescue. It's not any of these pictures and these scenarios that you're coming up with in your head.
Yeah.
It's me. And like, I don't know, but that was so profound to me. And it was like, what, growing up in the church, it's like, we
Yeah.
know those connections, and we know that's foreshadowing of Jesus. But like, in our literal circumstances, it was just a matter of like, what you're looking for is me.
Mm.
And I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that is
So good.
vague to some extent, but
No.
also like,
But it's so
um,
applicable to everyone.
because at the end of it, Jesus doesn't provide so that we can find the comfort in the provision. Like, he provides to remind us that like our comfort and our dependence is on him, and like that's where we ultimately. And I think sometimes whenever the provision doesn't look like what we want it to, um maybe that's even the kindness of the Lord of being like, It's because it's not about the provision. It's not about the thing that you get. It's about me. It's about
Yeah.
what you need from me.
Yeah.
Um, anyways.
Yeah. Nope. I think you I think that pretty much wraps it up.
Now we constantly have to be reminded of
I
that,
gotta
you
go.
know?
I gotta go wrestle a little bit
Yeah.
after that. So,
Ah,
um,
you know,
you know,
we need that constant reminder though. I mean, it's because even when you have wrestled and even when you come to those conclusions, life,
we
we
do.
still have to be
Yeah,
reminded. I say all the time, we are Israel, like we're the Israelites, and we just have to, we have
it
to constantly be
is.
reminded.
And this is gonna sound like repeating some of the things that we've said about wrestling and providing and humility and all of those things, but one of the passages I've returned to a lot lately because the Lord has answered specific prayers, but
Hmm.
he's done it in ways that are humbling. He's
Yeah.
done it in ways that I have said, I hate this.
Hmm.
And it's 1 Kings 17. It's Elijah, not Elisha, who we were talking about. I'll get those confused forever too.
Yes.
No worries. You can still be a follower of Christ.
Yes.
But Elijah, who comes before Elisha, and also a prophet, also
Yes.
has a story with a widow. So
It's
that's,
real
don't
confusing.
worry about it. We're not gonna get lost in the reeds there, but he is given the task to go before the king, King Ahab at the time, and say, like, y'all have been worshiping Baal, y'all turned away from the one true God, and now he's sending a drought. And he risked his life to stand before the king and do that
Hmm.
because it wasn't going to be received well. He knew that. So he does that. And we studied Elijah a lot this summer because we did Priscilla Shire's Bible study on him. And the question she would bring it back to is we all want this bold faith like Elijah on Mount Carmel when he battles the prophets and it's hundreds of prophets versus him and they
Hmm.
call out all day to false gods. Nothing happens on their altar. At the time of sacrifice, he repairs the altar of the Lord, prays a simple prayer. The Lord sends down fire, even though his altar was drenched with water 3 times. So, just this miraculous,
Hmm.
like, beautiful display of bold faith and the Lord coming through. And she said, the question was, we, we all want the faith that he has, but
Hmm.
are we willing to do what he did to get what he got?
Hmm.
And I took that question, and this is a valid point of like, are we willing to be brave and bold and
Yeah.
courageous in order
Yeah.
for that to happen? And that is something we have to wrestle with. But it's also, are you willing to be as lowly
Hmm.
and dependent as Elijah was? Because right after, I mean, in the same passage, verses apart, he says that to the king and is obedient to what he's asked to do. The Lord says, "Now go away to this brook Kerith and hide yourself away." And that right there, I want to come into defense of Elijah just for his sake, nothing
Hmm.
personal.
Right.
Um, and just be like, okay, but he did what you asked him to do, and now he's gonna go hide himself away.
Yeah.
Like, how come you didn't set him up publicly as bring justice there in that moment? How come you didn't
Yeah.
defend him publicly in that way? Like you did provide protection, but like you allowed him to go and be misunderstood for years, like
Yeah.
hidden
Yeah.
away and dependent on you. And the way that he provides is through a brook, and a drought's going to be one of the
Hmm.
first places that dries up.
Yeah.
And then through ravens, who Priscilla Shire pointed out that they're notorious creatures for being selfish and
Hmm.
petty and never returning to the same place. I'm like, am I the raven in the story? But but
Could have
but
been a
she's
sparrow. Like,
yeah,
why did that be a
yeah,
raven?
right. Anything else? Um, but she pointed that out, and I'm like, okay, he's dependent on these selfish creatures.
Yeah.
And you can look at that story and be like, wow, like the Lord provided 3 ravens, but when you're the one waiting on the raven to bring
Yeah.
your meal every day, you're like, why can't we just
Yeah.
store up some,
Yes.
why do I have to be dependent day after day? And then he allows the brook to dry up.
Hmm.
And we struggle with things like this because we think you are able, you could have made this run. You could have supernaturally set me up in a little cabin that was
Yeah.
comfortable and
Mhm.
made just my garden grow or whatever. But he didn't, he didn't remove Elijah from everyone else's suffering
Yeah.
because he was teaching him the suffering of the people too,
Mhm.
even though it wasn't, he didn't bring that.
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
and then from there he says, go to Zarephath, and there I've commanded a widow to help you. Now, a couple of things. Zarephath means a place of refinement and a place of smelting. Yes, you heard that correctly. Smelting is refining in the sense of changing something chemically.
Yeah.
Um, and we want to say smelt or no smelting.
Yes.
I would like set up for the no smelting package. Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes. Yeah.
He smelts, but he does not smoke, and there's
Yes.
a
There you
distinction.
go. There you
Um,
go.
but he goes, sends him to this place, and just think about this. Like, when any man that you know wants to go to a single woman with no job in a season of depression, everyone's struggling or
Mhm.
whatever, and say, "Hey, can you take care of me as
Right.
well?" I mean, how humbling
Yeah.
was that? And in that day, widows couldn't get a job. She had no help, and then she has this son, and then he goes at the
Mhm.
word of the Lord, and he shows up, and she is like, "Well, I have this little bit of oil and this little bit of flour. I'm about to make our last meal, and then we're gonna die." And, like, he still has to stay there and ask.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't have enough. He knows he's taking something from her, and he still has to follow God's word.
Yeah.
How humbling and
Oh,
lowly
yeah.
would that feel to put yourself in Elijah's shoes? But there was benefit that was outside of just Elijah,
Mhm.
and that was for the widow and the son, because they got to see their surplus miraculously
Yes.
come back every
Yes.
day, enough for every day, and learning to depend on the Lord in ways that they didn't have before he got there.
Mhm.
Okay, then he allows the son to grow ill and die.
Yeah.
And the woman is like, "You are a man of God. Did you bring my sin to remembrance?"
Right.
Is that like, is this punishment? And Elijah takes the boy upstairs and says, "God, would you allow even this?" I'm
Right.
paraphrasing.
Yeah.
"Would you
But
allow
yeah.
even this woman that I'm staying with to take her son?" So he has that moment. So we know that he's feeling, "You've allowed this,
Oh,
would you allow even this?" There's a
yes.
lot there. Um, but then he has nowhere else to go, and so he asks for God to redeem that boy's life. And scripture says something like, "And the Lord listened to the voice of Elijah, and brought back the boy's life, and he was revived." And just that picture we see of, sometimes he does allow things to die so that he can show you
Mm.
that he can revive them.
Mm. Yeah.
And you're looking at it through the eyes of Elijah still, but he takes the boy back downstairs, and I want to read this. It says, "And Elijah took the child and brought him down from the upper chamber into the house and delivered him to his mother. And Elijah said, 'See, your son lives.' And the woman said, 'Now I know that you are a man of God, and the word of the Lord in your mouth is true.'"
Mm.
And I read that the other day when I was literally journaling parts of scripture and saying, "Why?"
Yes.
Journaling scripture, why?
Yeah.
Like, that was where I was at with the Lord. And then when I read that, I thought, if I think that my role here on earth in this time in history is to follow God and to live a smooth,
Mhm.
comfortable life, then this doesn't make sense at all.
Mm-mm.
But if I believe that I am called to be a light in the darkness, then sometimes I'm going to have to be in darkness for that light to be inexplicably evident.
Yes.
And what if we really are what if it's really not about us? And what if we really are meant to be these clay vessels
Yeah.
with his hope and his light that sometimes crack and sometimes break
Yeah.
and sometimes show that it's really not us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we're out here thinking that our we should be rewarded for our filthy rags. It
Mm-hmm.
says our righteousness is like filthy rags,
Yeah.
and like in actuality, we're not deserving of anything, and yet everything he gives us is so freely and so gracious and so
Yeah.
loving. But he does allow that. He does allow suffering and he does allow hardship because it isn't just about us.
Right.
It is actually so that we can empathize with others and so that we can bring comfort to others, so that he can use us
Mm-hmm.
to bring him glory.
Yeah.
And if that's the desire of our heart,
Right.
he will do that.
Yeah.
Despite what we want.
Yeah. And it's not gonna always, probably rarely feels good.
No.
It doesn't, I mean, yeah.
But I do think it brings gratefulness and trust later to look back and go, once again,
Yeah.
you knew what you were doing.
Oh,
You weren't
yeah.
always surprised, but
Yeah. For sure.
well, I sense a lot of wrestling matches
For sure.
happening out there in the world.
Yeah. Hopefully so.
Yeah,
That's what
hopefully.
the hope is.
He is faithful to show us.
Yes.
He's not slow and he's not silent
Mm-mm.
like it feels sometimes.
No.
But, well, Lindsay.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
It was good.
It was good.
He did provide.
He did. He provided the words because we were both like, I don't know. I'm not sure. I have the brain energy today. Yeah.
Oh, thanks so much for coming and sharing.
I'm slowly but surely enjoying it more and more.
Look at you.
Won't he do it?
Look at you. True surrender right
There
there.
you go.
True surrender.
It really is. It really is.
No passivity about that.
No.
Well,
Gosh.
thank y'all so much for listening in, and we will see you next week on The Saltworks.
This is my story. This is your story.